Magistrate looked across the bench at my son-in-law and my daughter. Her reading glasses were perched at the end of her nose, and she hadn't looked up from the documents in front of her for almost a full minute. The courtroom in Mississauga was so quiet I could hear the heating system ticking. "Mr. and Mrs. Sandhu," she said finally, "this application is asking me to declare your father legally incapable of managing his own financial affairs." She set the papers down. "On what basis exactly?" My daughter's lawyer started to speak. The magistrate raised one finger without looking at him. "I'm asking your clients." My daughter stood slowly. She was wearing the gray blazer I'd bought her for a promotion 3 years ago. I remembered being so proud when she called me with that news. I remembered driving 40 minutes to take her and her husband out to dinner to celebrate. "Dad has been making decisions that concern us," she said. "Large withdrawals, changes to legal documents. We think he may not fully understand. Has he been assessed by a physician? We have a letter from—" I read the letter. The magistrate's voice didn't change in volume, but something in it shifted. "What I'm asking is whether your father has been formally assessed through the Capacity Assessment Office, as required under the Substitute Decisions Act." Silence. "Has he?" My daughter's lawyer leaned over and whispered something. She sat down. The magistrate looked at me for the first time since I'd walked in. I was sitting beside my own lawyer, Gordon Webb, a man I'd found through a referral from my accountant and who had, over the past 4 months, become someone I considered a genuine ally. "Mr. Whitmore," the magistrate said, "you submitted a response to this application." "Yes, Your Honor. Would you like to say anything before I rule?" Gordon touched my arm lightly. We'd talked about this. He'd said I didn't need to say anything, that the paperwork spoke for itself. But I'd thought about this moment for 4 months. I'd rehearsed it in my kitchen at 6 in the morning, over instant coffee, standing at the window watching the street. "Your Honor," I said, "over the past 4 years, I gave my daughter and her husband $180,000 in what I described as gifts. I co-signed a mortgage on a property in Oakville worth just over $600,000. I made monthly transfers of $4,000 for what my daughter called household support." I paused. "When I had a cardiac event in February and spent 11 days in Sunnybrook, my daughter and her husband were in Puerto Vallarta. They knew I was in hospital. They had been told by my neighbor the morning it happened. They did not come home. The courtroom was very still. The month after I was discharged, I stopped the transfers. I retained a lawyer and I revised my will. My daughter and her husband have now filed this application suggesting I am incapable of making sound decisions." I looked at the magistrate. "I would suggest that the evidence points in the opposite direction." The magistrate looked at my daughter's lawyer for a long moment. Then she looked down at her documents again. "This application is dismissed," she said. "There is no evidence of incapacity. There is not even a proper capacity assessment, which is a fundamental requirement. What there is a father who stopped giving money to his adult children, and adult children who have responded by attempting to use this court as a collection mechanism." She removed her glasses entirely. "I'm ordering costs against the applicants. Mr. Whitmore's legal fees, to be paid within 45 days. Counsel, please submit the figure." Gordon had already calculated it. $14,200. My daughter made a sound I hadn't heard from her since she was a teenager. A kind of high, compressed exhale. Her husband put his hand on her arm and she shook it off. The gavel came down. Gordon shook my hand in the corridor. He had the composed, unhurried manner of a man who had won cases like this before, and understood that the right response was not celebration. "They'll receive the cost order within the week," he said. "Do you want to discuss enforcement now, or—" "They don't have $14,000, I said. He nodded slowly. I had a feeling. Their financial disclosure was revealing. I said goodbye to Gordon in the lobby and stood outside for a moment in the February air. It was cold the way February in Ontario is always cold. Not dramatically, just relentlessly, like a fact you have no argument against. My neighbor Colette had driven me. She was waiting in her Subaru at the curb with the heater running, and when she saw me come through the doors, she reached over and pushed mine open from the inside. "Well," she said. "Dismissed." She made a sound of quiet satisfaction and pulled out into traffic. She'd known me for 22 years. She'd been the one who called my daughter the morning I was taken to Sunnybrook. She was the one who had told me very carefully 3 weeks later that my daughter had texted her back from Mexico, asking her to keep an eye on things. Not asking when the next flight home was, asking my neighbor to keep an eye on things. My phone was buzzing by the time Colette dropped me off at my house in Brampton. My daughter. I let it go to voicemail. It rang again immediately. I set the phone face down on the kitchen counter and put the kettle on. By the time I'd made tea, it had rung 9 more times. I picked it up and looked at the screen. 11 missed calls in under 20 minutes, all from my daughter. I listened to the voicemails in order. The first one was careful, controlled. "Dad, we need to talk about this. This isn't what it looked like in there. Call me back." The second one, less careful. "Dad, I know you're home. I know you got there. Please just call me." The third one, her husband's voice instead. A low, tight sound. "Gordon, you need to understand that this isn't finished. We have options we haven't considered." He'd called me Gordon. He'd been calling me Gordon for 12 years. "My name is not Gordon. My name is Elliot." The fourth call, my daughter again. Her voice had changed. The control was gone. "Do you have any idea what you've done? Do you understand what this costs us? We have a mortgage payment due in 3 weeks. There are things you don't know about. There are bills." I stopped the voicemail. I didn't delete them. I saved them to a folder I'd already set up on my phone because Gordon Webb had advised me to document everything, and I had learned over the past year to take documentation seriously. I sat in my kitchen with my tea and thought about the last 4 years. I had started giving my daughter and her husband money because I thought I was helping. That's the honest version. I'd sold my business in 2019, a plumbing supply company I'd run for 26 years in Brampton, and I had more money than I needed, and my daughter had called in the early days of the pandemic and said things were difficult, that her husband's income had dropped, that the mortgage was frightening them. I'd wired $10,000 that week, then another $10,000 3 months later. Then the idea of co-signing the mortgage came up gently. Over several conversations, then the monthly transfer started, which was supposed to be temporary but had never in 4 years been discussed as ending. I had believed I was being a good father. I had believed I was being responsible with the money. I had believed, and this is the part I find hardest to look at directly, that the money was creating closeness between us, that I was needed, that the dinners and the visits and the phone calls were real. The cardiac event in February changed my understanding of several things. I had not had a heart attack. The cardiologist was clear about that. It was a significant arrhythmia that required intervention, monitoring, and 11 days inpatient while they adjusted medication and assessed whether I needed further procedures. It was frightening. Not in the dramatic movie sense of frightening, but in the quiet, rearranging sense, where you lie in a hospital bed at midnight listening to the equipment and you start sorting through things in your mind, deciding what matters. My daughter had known by 8 in the morning. Colette had texted her. I had assumed, lying in that bed, that she would come. It didn't occur to me that she wouldn't come. She lived 40 minutes away. Her husband had a flexible job. I was not dying, but I was alone in a hospital room with wires attached to my chest, and she knew that, and she did not come. She had texted me on the 3rd day. "Thinking of you, Dad. Hope you're feeling better soon. The doctors are taking good care of you." I had read that text probably 40 times over the following weeks. I kept trying to find something in it I'd missed, some signal of genuine distress that her situation hadn't allowed her to act on. I couldn't find it. On the day I was discharged, Colette picked me up. She made soup. She helped me get settled. She stayed until 8 in the evening to make sure I was stable and had everything I needed. My neighbor, who I'd met because our recycling bins kept getting mixed up in the early 2000s. That was the week I called Gordon Webb. The weeks after the court ruling were very quiet. My daughter did not call again after that first day. Or rather, she stopped calling. There were 2 texts in the first week, both short, both asking me to reconsider. I did not respond to them. My granddaughter, my daughter's daughter, called me twice in that period. She was 15. Her name is Ivy, and she has her great-grandmother's dark eyes and a habit of getting right to the point that I find both alarming and deeply reassuring. "Grandpa," she said, the first time, "Mom is really upset." "I know she is, sweetheart. She and Dad aren't sleeping. I can hear them at night." I thought about how to answer that. "That's hard. Are you okay?" "I'm okay. I just wanted to know if you're okay." "I'm okay. I just wanted to know if you're okay." "I'm okay. I'm doing fine." There was a pause. "Grandpa, can I ask you something?" "Of course. Is it true you were in the hospital and nobody told me?" "That one landed somewhere painful. Your parents decided not to tell you. I think they thought it would upset you." "It upsets me more that I didn't know." A beat. "I would have come." I believed her. 15 years old, and she would have come. Through Gordon, I learned over the following weeks that the financial picture at my daughter's house was considerably worse than I'd understood. They had been using the monthly transfers as a structural part of their budget, not as supplemental income, but as an actual load-bearing wall. When I removed it, the whole fraying started showing. Credit cards, a line of credit against the Oakville property, a personal loan my daughter had taken out the previous spring that she had not mentioned to me. The total debt, excluding the mortgage, was somewhere around $35,000. They also owed me $14,200 in court-ordered costs, which they could not pay. The mortgage payment came and went. Then another. Gordon informed me quietly that they were now 2 months behind. The lender had begun its standard process. I heard through Ivy, because she told me things without my asking the way direct people do, that her father had gone to his manager to ask for a raise and been told there was nothing available, that her mother had taken on a second job doing administrative work for a clinic in Mississauga 3 evenings a week, that the family had sold the second car, the newer one, and her mother took the bus to the clinic job, and her father drove the older car that had been sitting in the driveway since its registration lapsed. Mom cried about the car, Ivy told me. Not like sobbing, just quiet. In the kitchen when she thought I wasn't there. I didn't feel satisfied hearing that. I want to be clear about that. I felt something more complicated. A heaviness. Not for the situation I'd caused, but for the years it had taken me to understand what I'd been participating in. My daughter and I'd become the person she was in a vacuum. I'd helped build the conditions. I'd handed money over without expectation, without conversation, without any kind of reckoning about what it was doing to either of us. The house listed 3 months after the court date. I saw it on the real estate app my accountant had suggested I monitor. A small detail that carried a weight out of proportion to its size. I had been in that house dozens of times. I had helped them move in. I remembered standing in the empty living room the day they got the keys, watching my daughter walk through the rooms touching the walls. The listing price was $640,000. They accepted an offer in the 3rd week at $610,000. I did the math quietly in my head, the way I'd done numbers in my business for 26 years. After the mortgage payoff and the debts, they would clear somewhere between $40,000 and $50,000. Enough to start again. Enough to make different choices if they chose to. My son-in-law called me on a Saturday morning in April. I almost didn't answer. There was no version of this conversation I was eager to have, but something made me pick up. "Elliot," he said. He had not called me Elliot in a very long time. "Yes." A long pause. "I'd like to meet. Just me, if you're willing." We met at a Tim Hortons in Brampton, which was my choice. Not for any symbolic reason, just because it was close and I knew it, and I didn't want neutral territory that felt staged. I got there first. I ordered a medium coffee and sat in a corner booth and watched the door. He looked smaller than I remembered. That sounds like something from a film, but it's true. He lost weight, and his coat looked like it belonged to someone who'd been slightly larger. He came to the table and sat down and looked at his hands for a moment. "I'm not here to ask you for anything," he said. "Okay, He stopped, started again. "I need to say something to you, and I've been trying to find the right way to say it, and I don't think there is one, so I'm just going to say it." He looked up. "I knew you were in the hospital. I got the text from Colette the same time Catherine did, and I told her we should stay. I did say that. I want you to know I said it." He paused. "But when she said the trip was paid for and that you'd be fine, I didn't push. I let it go, and I should have pushed. I held my coffee cup. I didn't say anything. I let her make a decision I knew was wrong," he continued. "Because I always let her make the decisions I knew were wrong, because it was easier than fighting about it. And I told myself it didn't matter, that you were being taken care of, that it was only a few more days. I told myself a lot of things." He exhaled slowly. None of them were true. Outside, a truck rattled past on the street. "I'm not asking you to change anything," he said. "I'm not asking you to change the will or reinstate anything or forgive us. I just needed to sit across from you and tell you that I understand what we did and that I'm sorry." I studied him. I had known this man for 12 years. I'd watched him at my daughter's side through a wedding and the birth of his child and a dozen Christmases. I'd handed him money. I'd worked 26 years to earn. I had wanted, for a long time, to be angry at him in a clean, uncomplicated way. "Is Catherine going to be all right?" I said. He took a breath. He hesitated. "She's having a hard time accepting that the situation is her fault. She keeps looking for the version of events where someone else is responsible." A small pained pause. "It might take her a while." "And Ivy?" His face changed when I said her name. A loosening around the eyes. "Ivy's okay. She's tough. She keeps telling us she's fine, and I think she actually is, mostly, but she also—" He stopped. "She really loves you. She talks about you all the time. She's worried about you." "I'm fine," I said. "Tell her I'm fine. She'd like to see you." "I know. I'll arrange something with her directly." He nodded. We sat in silence for a moment. The Tim Hortons mid-morning sounds went on around us. The machine hissing, someone's order being called out, a child complaining about something at a table near the window. "What are you going to do?" I asked. He ran his hand over his face. "They're renting a place in Hamilton. Less expensive. Catherine found something in a decent area near Ivy's school, so we didn't have to change that." He paused. "I got a second job. Weekends, delivery work. It's not what I expected my life to look like at 44. Another pause. "But it's honest." "That's something." I looked at him across the table. He was not the enemy I'd spent the last year preparing to face. He was a man in a Tim Hortons who looked tired and who had, somewhere in the wreckage of the previous months, worked out what he'd done wrong. That counted for something. It didn't erase anything, but it counted. "I'm not changing the will," I said. "Not right now. Maybe not ever. That depends on things I can't see yet, I understand. But Ivy shouldn't be penalized for any of this. I've already spoken to my lawyer about setting up an education fund for her. It'll be structured so it goes to her directly, not through you or Catherine." He closed his eyes briefly. When he opened them, there was something in them I hadn't seen in a long time. "Thank you." "Don't thank me. Just be a better father to her than either of you have been lately. That's all I'm asking." He nodded, and for a moment neither of us said anything, and it was not an uncomfortable silence. It was the kind that happens when something real has been said, and there's nothing left to add. I stood to go. He stood too. He extended his hand. I looked at it for a moment, then shook it. Not forgiveness, just acknowledgement. A door left slightly open, which was more than I'd been willing to offer 6 months ago. Colette was surprised to see me home before noon. She had come over to drop off some mail that had ended up in her box by mistake, and she was standing in my kitchen when I came in. "How was it?" she asked. "Honest," I said. He was honest. She studied me. "And Catherine?" "Not yet." I filled the kettle. Maybe eventually. I don't know. I heard through Ivy over the spring months that things in Hamilton were difficult but stabilizing. Her parents had stopped fighting every night. Her father seemed calmer since he'd started the second job. Her mother had enrolled in an online course in healthcare administration, which was, according to Ivy, something she'd mentioned wanting to do 10 years ago and had never gotten around to. "She seems like she's actually thinking about stuff," Ivy told me. "Like actually thinking, not just reacting." "That's a good sign," I said. "I think so too." A pause. "Grandpa, can I come over this weekend? I want to see the workshop." I had built a workshop in the back of my garage when I retired. Nothing elaborate, just a proper bench and decent tools and enough space to do woodworking, which I'd been wanting to take up properly since my 40s. I'd been building a small table out of reclaimed pine, and I mentioned it to Ivy at some point, and she had apparently been thinking about it. "Saturday works," I said. She arrived Saturday at 11 with her father, who dropped her off and waited at the curb with the engine running. I watched from the window. He didn't come to the door. That was the right call. We weren't there yet, and he knew it. Ivy came in and immediately wanted to see the table. It was nearly done, 3 of the 4 legs attached, the top planed and sanded but not yet finished. She ran her hand along the grain in the way people do when they're genuinely interested rather than being polite. "Did you make this?" she said, a little awed. "Most of it I'd help from a guy at the woodworking club on the joinery." "Can I help finish it?" We spent 4 hours in the workshop. I showed her how to apply the finish, how to sand between coats, when to go with the grain and when it didn't matter. She was focused and careful and asked good questions, and when the first coat was on and we were sitting on the back step waiting for it to dry, she leaned against my arm the way she had when she was small. "Grandpa," she said. Do you think it'll ever be okay? With Mom, I mean." I thought about that for a while before I answered. I'd learned in the past year that the most honest answer is usually not the fastest one. "I think there's a chance," I said. "I don't know when. I think your mother has to want it first, and I think that's going to take her time. But I haven't closed the door." Ivy nodded slowly. "She talks about you sometimes, when she doesn't know I'm listening. What does she say? She said once that she doesn't know who she is without your money." A pause. I think she meant it as a bad thing, about herself. That stayed with me for a long time after Ivy left. My daughter in her own house in Hamilton, confronting the person she'd become in the years of easy money, and the person she might still be if she was willing to look at it directly. That kind of accounting is painful in a way that has nothing to do with finances. I knew something about it myself. 3 weeks later, Catherine called. Not her husband, her. The number came up on my phone and I sat with it for 2 rings before I answered. "Dad." Her voice was thin, careful, like she was stepping out onto ice she didn't trust. "Catherine." A long pause. "I don't." She stopped. Started again. "I don't have anything figured out. I don't have a speech prepared. I've been sitting here for an hour trying to write down what I wanted to say, and I kept deleting it." Another pause. "All I know is I can't keep not calling you. I can't keep pretending that you don't exist. You're my father." I waited. "I was wrong," she said. "About so many things. About what I thought I deserved and who I thought you were supposed to be to me. And about the hospital." Her voice broke slightly on the last word, and she steadied it. "I think about that every day. That you were alone. That I let that happen." "You did let that happen," I said quietly. "Not cruelly. just truthfully. I know. A breath. I know I did. And I don't have an explanation that makes it okay. I need you to know that I know. I looked out my kitchen window. February had finally let go. There were patches of brown grass showing at the edge of the yard, and the light had changed. The particular shift that means spring is coming, even if the temperature hasn't agreed yet. I'm not ready to pretend nothing happened, I said. That's not on the table. I'm not asking for that. I'm not changing anything I've changed legally. Not right now. I'm not asking for that either. What are you asking for? A long silence. I don't know. Maybe just, I'd like to call you sometimes. If that's okay. Without it being about anything specific. I'd just like to know you're there. I thought about that. I thought about my daughter as a small girl who used to climb into my bed on Sunday mornings and demand I read her the comics. I thought about the woman who'd stood in a courtroom and tried to have me declared incapable of managing my own affairs. I thought about the fact that those were the same person and that neither version of her canceled the other out. You can call, I said. We'll see where it goes. That was enough for now. I finished the table 2 weeks after that. It came out better than I'd expected. Solid, clean-lined, with a warmth in the pine that the finish had brought out in a way I hadn't quite anticipated. I set it in the dining room, where it looked, I thought, exactly right. Colette came over for dinner that evening and looked at it for a long time. You built that, she said. More or less. It's really good, Elliot. I stood beside her and looked at it. I'd started that table in January, when everything was still in motion. The court application pending, the legal fees accumulating, the daily low-grade tension of not knowing how things would resolve. I'd started it because I needed something to do with my hands, something to work on that had clear, measurable progress. I had not expected it to become, somewhere along the way, a kind of record. You know, I said, when I started I wasn't sure I'd get it right. I'd never done a mortise and tenon joint before. The guy at the club said it would take me 3 tries before I got a good one. How many did it take? 2, I said, which I'm unreasonably proud of. Colette laughed. I looked at the table and thought about my daughter calling once a week, now careful conversations that were slowly, unevenly becoming more real. I thought about Ivy in the workshop with finish on her hands, asking exactly the right questions. I thought about my son-in-law working delivery shifts on weekends without complaint. I thought about all the versions of this that might still happen, some better, some worse, and the fact that, for the first time in years, I was watching it unfold from a position of my own choosing rather than being carried along by it. I was 67 years old. I had built a table that would last 30 years. I had, finally, stopped being an ATM with a granddaughter attached to it, and started being a person again. There was still damage in the walls. There always would be, but the foundation was solid, and for the first time in a long time, it was actually mine. I think about that text message more than I probably should. The doctors are taking good care of you. 8 words. Not even a question mark at the end. My daughter sitting dad from a resort in Puerto Vallarta, while I was alone in the hospital room at Sunnybrook with wires on my chest. And for a long time I kept reading it trying to find something I'd missed, some layer of worry underneath the words that I just wasn't seeing. There wasn't one. What I've come to understand is that actions don't lie the way words can. Catherine had learned, over years of comfortable arrangements, that words were enough, that saying the right thing covered for not doing the right thing. And I had let that happen. I had funded it, actually, every month, $4,000, no conditions, no conversations about what it meant or what I expected or who we were becoming to each other because of it. I told myself it was generosity. What it was, more honestly, was avoidance. Neither of us had to reckon with anything as long as the transfers kept going. When I stopped them, the reckoning arrived for both of us. I don't think my daughter is a bad person. I've spent a lot of time thinking about that. because it would be easier in some ways if she were. What she is someone who stopped paying attention. To me, to her own husband, eventually to herself. She built a life around a version of security that wasn't real, because it wasn't hers. And when it disappeared, she had to face, for the first time in years, the question of who she actually was without it. That's a hard question at any age. At 42, with a teenage daughter watching, it's harder. Ivy is the one who keeps me honest about all of this. She's 15, and she sees things clearly in the way that people do before they learn to look away. She would have come to the hospital. She said that, and I believed her. That kind of instinct. The impulse to show up, to be present when someone needs you. That's not something you're born with and not something you're given. It's something you practice or don't over years of small choices. Ivy has been practicing it without anyone telling her to. I find that remarkable. Her father, to his credit, figured out what he'd done wrong and said so to my face, in a Tim Hortons without asking for anything in return. That took more courage than I'd expected from him. Maybe losing everything clarified something. Maybe it takes that sometimes. What I know is that I spent 4 years confusing financial support with love, and the confusion cost all of us something. The money wasn't the problem. I had it, and helping your family is not wrong. The problem was the absence of honesty, the absence of real expectation, the absence of the simple understanding that care has to move in both directions, where eventually it hollows out and there's nothing left inside it. I'm 67. I built a table this winter that turned out better than I expected, and my granddaughter helped finish it. And those 4 hours in the workshop are worth more to me than 4 years of transfers ever were. That's not a metaphor. That's just what happened. The foundation is solid now. It took losing nearly everything. Trust, closeness, the version of my family I thought I had, to get here. But I got here. And I did it by finally doing the thing I should have done years ago, telling the truth, holding the line, and refusing to buy something that should have been given freely.